I'm going to invite all the panelists to come back on here. We can open it up for questions right now. I got a few that we've kind of been going through that we're going to rehash here, but then also, like, if there's some additional questions, feel free to drop them into the chat. What I'm going to start off with is Freddie. I think this is a good one, just to kind of get some background. So they asked about ingress and terminating gateways running on Envoy. Could you maybe give us a little bit of background about like how we kind of architected these and how they essentially how they work?
Good question. So yes, someone had asked if these were running Envoy, and yes, they are. All kinds of gateways that we have are instances of Envoy. This is the case for mesh gateways, ingress gateways, and terminating gateways. And what Consul does is that it will take care of pushing all of the configuration to it dynamically. So you can configure like intentions, the upstreams, the like load balancing settings, etc., via Consul, and then we'll make sure that that Envoy proxy gets configured the way you want it to be.
Awesome, thank you. Cody, this one, I think there was a couple different questions on it, but I think it would be good for you to kind of dive into a little bit more. Could you talk a little bit about how Consul Connect interacts with like VM environments and systemd in particular, like running those systemd jobs?
Yeah, thanks for, I forgot that we had committed to answering this one. So yeah, the process ultimately runs kind of the same, right? Envoy has a binary that can be run on VMs as well. So like typically people are used to running Envoy in a Docker container and it lives as a sidecar in Cube or whatever, right? But there is actually an Envoy binary that can be run and we can actually use systemd to turn that on. So like in my environment, I run Envoy as a systemd job alongside, and it's registering services as they come up. So it really works very, very similarly as far as doing a job, starting and having a startup as the system comes online. It's a consistent experience to running in like an actual Consul systemd job. I know we have a Mike from engineering or Blake from PM on there. Is there anything you want to add? I know that Blake had a thing he was working on around templating systemd. So happy to have either one of you talk a little bit about your perspectives from more of the engineering or product side. Blake might have disappeared.
I guess just, yeah, briefly from the engineering side. Hi, I'm Mike. I'm an engineering manager on the Consul team. And yeah, we're hoping to hear more about the use cases that customers and users are finding for terminating ingress gateways and learning about new deployment patterns and any like successes or challenges that you have with them. So like, let us know what works well and let us know what you want to do that you can't yet. And we're happy to figure out how to best incorporate those into our roadmap.
Yeah, and hi, my name is Blake Covarrubias. I'm a product manager on the Consul team. Just back to the systemd thing that Cody was talking about. I think, I shared a link in the Q&A answers to an example of creating a systemd unit. I think that's one way that you can automate the process of starting and managing the lifecycle of sidecars on Consul. There's obviously other ways that you can start those processes as well, using things like supervisor D and upstart. So definitely, please let us know what is of interest to the folks in the community, and we can put together examples in our documentation showing how to run it on various different VM platforms or under different operating systems.
Thanks, Blake. Since I have you off mute, I am going to ask you just to dive into this one because I think it was a good question. Talk a little bit about access logs, getting those from our sidecars, so like specifically from Envoy. I think you had a really good answer here that I think the rest of the group would appreciate.
Yeah, so at the moment, the way that Envoy works is when you start it up, it'll log different messages and things to standard out. So if you're running in Kubernetes, you can just do a kubectl logs on the sidecar pod and see output that's coming from there, or in a VM environment, you'll be able to see that under systemd or journal CTL, for example. But when you need to do a little more troubleshooting and get some better visibility into the requests that are going in the environment, by default, Envoy's log levels don't provide that amount of detail. So what you can do is you can use Envoy's administrative API to change the logging level, to raise it to a higher level. And Envoy does give you some granularity there, so you can raise the log level for just HTTP traffic or HTTP2 or TCP, kind of whatever you're looking at to get that detail. At the moment, we don't provide a way to save those access logs to persist them. If you're using, again, systemd or something, you can offload them that way, but we don't have a way natively in Consul to write it to disk. That is a feature request, though, that we're looking at supporting in the near term, so that you would be able to more easily save that data and archive that for whatever purposes.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. Cody, you had touched on this one, but I think it's a good distinction. Could you tell us a little bit about the differences between like the intentions that we've been talking about and something like annotations in Kubernetes?
Yeah, so like I'll answer this in kind of two ways, both from like a science of cube perspective. Annotations are a way to just add, I don't want to call them notes, but like annotations to the running state of like your pods, your deployments. And if you do take a deployment, it's inherited on the pods, so on and so forth. So like these are essentially like usually like metadata associated with the things that you're running. Intentions are actually like a security construct. These are identity based allowing or disallowing of traffic between instances. Now, in the case of Consul, there's a little bit of a, I don't want to say a blurred line at all, but like there's a little bit of a distinction because those annotations in Consul actually do things. Like you can have annotations that set metadata versions of the app. So V1 versus V2, similar to what I showed in my demo of like the V1 API, V2 API. You can set those versions in annotations. You can also use annotations to control if it joins a service mesh or not. You can set them to set the default service if it's an HTTP service, or the default port for the service if it runs on like 5,000. So like in the Consul world, those annotations, and even Vault, right? Vault has the Helm chart as well. And like those annotations are how we control the way secrets are distributed from a Vault standpoint as well in the Helm chart. So annotations have a function in that case, and a lot of vendors will use annotations to drive change and functionality to a kube cluster. But you can think of those more as like just notes on a pod or notes on a part of a Kubernetes deployment that could be used or could not be used to do a thing, but there's no overlap between intentions and those. Intentions are truly a like identity-based security construct, allowing, disallowing traffic between A, B, 10 A's, 4 B's, so on and so forth.
Awesome. Thanks, Cody. Mike and Freddie, I'll kind of toss this over to both of you because we didn't really touch a ton on ACLs or tokens or anything. Could you maybe just walk through kind of like a high level overview of like how we handle like rotation of tokens and kind of how it plays in Connect, and then also maybe how both the terminating ingress gateways kind of interpret those ACL tokens, and just give like a high level overview about like essentially what role they play in terms of managing traffic and permissions.
So for ingress and terminating gateways, they do need special tokens. So each gateway is going to have to need, so I'll step to terminating gateways actually. They need permissions. Terminating gateways in a way impersonate a service in order to encrypt the inbound connection. So if you have, from my example, an API calling to the database, the terminating gateway is going to present a certificate for the database to the call from the API. In order to do that, it's going to need service write permissions on the services that it routes to. And it's also going to need node read on the services that it routes to. And whenever services are added or removed, there's a few ways that it could be done. You could either update the policies on the token that is attached to the gateway. You could provide a new token to it and restart it. Or there's also roles that could be updated on the gateway. So there's a lot of flexibility in terms of how you could update dynamically, like when you're updating that list of services, also ensuring that the gateway has enough permissions in order to discover the services it's going to route to request the certificates for them if it needs them. And yeah, those would be the big two.
Okay. So I know we had a couple questions on this. Yes, we'll have certain slides and everything from some of our recordings when we post those. I can leave it open for any questions. One thing I do want to launch is we do have a poll that we want to do. So I'll launch that now, or we're waiting to see if any other questions come in. So feel free and go ahead and enter, like if you'd like to have any follow-up information, or if you'd like to have someone from our sales team reach out or talk to you about any of our products. So we'll go ahead and leave that open. right, going through. Any other questions from the chat? Let's see if I can pull one from that we answered in our previous queue. I think this is actually a nice one, Blake. If you don't mind touching on this, because I know Matt unfortunately had to drop. Could you talk a little bit about like the agent deploy on Kubernetes and kind of what happens from a high availability and from a scale perspective?
Yeah, sure. So on Kubernetes, the way that Consul is deployed is a couple different ways. So it's important to kind of understand first that in Consul, you have Consul servers, which are managing basically the persistence of the data within the environment and aggregating the service catalog for services that are registered against the client agents that are deployed within the environment. So you'll typically have somewhere between 3 to 5 servers, and then any number of clients, depending on how many physical nodes exist within the data center. In Kubernetes, the servers are deployed as a stateful set. So they have persistent storage attached to them that to keep that data available across pod restarts. And then with the Consul clients, those are deployed as a daemon set. So you'll have one pod on a given physical worker node within Kubernetes. And we rely a lot on Kubernetes to keep those pods highly available. So if they crash, Kubernetes will take care of restarting them, making sure that they're up and running. From the data perspective, I touched on you have a handful of servers. Consul replicates data across the servers by default. So there is some aspect of high availability there. If you lose a server node, as long as you have enough servers to maintain quorum with the environment, you'll maintain availability of the Consul server cluster and also the integrity of that data. If you lose a node, you're not losing data that's still replicated on the other nodes. And then as long as you follow backup policy or a frequent backup policy, you're taking snapshots and storing them off-site. If you have some disaster that takes down the entire data center, then you have a way to recover from that. Mike or Freddie, anything you want to add on that topic?
You covered it well. Thank you.
Excellent. All right, we'll do a last call for questions here. Otherwise, I think we can go ahead and wrap it. One of the things I did want to mention, if there were any topics that we didn't cover, I know, for instance, like that tokens question, we gave kind of like a high-level overview. Our last virtual day, we actually did a dedicated ACL session, so make sure you go check that out. And make sure you check out HashiCorp.com/resources. You can see a bunch of Consul information. And as always, if you have any additional questions, you can feel free to reach out to us. So let me go ahead and end the poll here. We got everything good to go. And yep, so as I said, this has all been recorded. We're going to work on cutting some of this together and being able to post it on our website with some of the additional resources. I hope everybody learned something today, and have a great day.